Welcome to the Intellectual Army. I'm the serial intellectual. I'm the author of over 10 books, recently released Metamorphic Dictates, a collection of 365 statements to help you along your personal development journey and be you. I'm also the creator of 6 original personal development tools. You can find them all on my website, serialintellectual.com. I've had the privilege to work for over 20 years in organizations, working with individuals, personal development, and also leadership development. And I want to talk to you today about narratives, not generic narratives, but your narratives and my narratives, our narratives. I mentioned to you Metamorphic Dictus, and in week 6, Metamorphic Dictus saying 37, it says, control your narrative or it will control you. Control your narrative or it will control you. Another way we could say that is take responsibility for your narrative or it will control you. What's a narrative? A narrative is a story. It's a story. It's a series of events, circumstances that you put together. More specifically, what do narratives do in our lives? Narratives do a few things in our lives. Narratives explain things to us. Let me give an example. For example, I am religious. I'm a Christian. Okay. So the Bible is a narrative. It's a big book, 66 books. It's got a story. And the stories are like this, but they're generally connected. It's a narrative. It's a story that begins with a creation, a God, a fall. It's a story. All religions are basically narratives. They usually answer the 4 biggest questions in life, which is what narratives do, right? Where'd I come from? Or how did I get here? What's wrong? How do we fix it? How does it end? Movies are narratives. Narratives are things that help us understand life. They're the lens by which we see life. So, for example, if you are conservative or Republican, you have subscribed to a narrative. If you are liberal or Democrat, you have subscribed to a narrative. If you are pro-Black or pro-Palestine or pro-Israel, that's a narrative. It's something that helps you explain the world. It's how you interpret the world. But narratives do more than just explain things for us. Narratives validate us. They can. They can give us validation. This is where I come from. This is how I was raised. These are the things that are important. This is why I do what I do. Narratives justify us. Well, you see what happened is he was doing this and she was doing that and this happened and that happened and that's why I did this. Oh, now we get it. It's a narrative. What I'm saying is that either you own your narrative or your narrative will own you. Now, how do we own our narratives? Well, first by self-awareness. And when we talk about self-awareness, we're not just talking about being aware of our narrative. We're talking about being aware of who we are. Why is that important? Because who you are precedes your narrative. In other words, who you are is going to be the primary factor in how you interpret and apply your narrative. So you have to know who you are, because who you are is the most determinant factor in terms of what you're going to do with your narrative, how you're going to use your narrative. So self-awareness starts with who am I? Who am I? What are my predispositions? But secondly, we got to be aware of our narratives. Like, what are the stories we're telling ourselves? What are those stories? Have you ever noticed that, by the way, these narratives, they're like icebergs. You see the tip, but the majority of them are under our water, our subconscious. Hardly ever visit them. A good therapist, a good book, a real friend, they're going to eventually lead you to your real narrative and bring it out of the water or take you under so you can see it. Because not all narratives serve us well. Some of our narratives are riddled with fallacies and trauma and unhealed things. Control your narrative or it's going to control you. Look, we all wake up and the majority of things that we do in this life, we just do them. You say, yeah, but I'm making choices. Yes, you are, but most of our choices are being birthed by our narratives, which is why our narratives are so important, which is why it's so important to have a good narrative, a healthy narrative, a healed narrative, a reconciled narrative. You say, well, what do you mean reconciled? To you, to me, our narratives need to be reconciled. Control your narrative, or your narrative will control you. You know, oftentimes when I'm with a client, one of the things I try to do with them is to get them to understand their narrative. And one of the tools I use to do that is the life map, which helps them to go back in their past and give them put something practical in their hands so they can understand their narrative. This is why we use tools. This is why some of us go to therapy, because we want to understand our narrative. What are the underlying currents and stories we tell ourselves that are really steering our behaviors and feelings and thoughts? So, you want to control your narrative? First of all, you have to be aware of who you are. What are your predispositions? Because it's going to play a huge role on what you do with your narrative. Secondly, you've got to understand your narrative. You say, how do I do that? Start listening. You may need some help in doing that from a friend. You may need a tool. You may need therapy. And usually it takes time because these narratives are embedded in us from birth. And most narratives are caught, not taught. We just observe them and we imbibe them because we're permeated by them, right? And you really see this. So self-awareness, awareness of the narrative, and then you just gotta start asking questions about the narrative, because your narrative has you right where you are, and my narrative has me right where I'm at. That's the harsh reality. But the good news is we can change our narratives, and we can master our narratives, and we can get our narratives to work for us and not against us. But it's work. And the reality is a lot of people might say they want that, but they're not willing to put in the work to do it. If you're willing to put in the work to do it, you can control your narrative, and you can get your narrative to work for you and not against you. Grace and peace.